At 0347 hours, the waters of the Persian Gulf lay black and motionless, flat as sheet iron under a sky with no moon and no stars. Visibility was zero. Fog rolling off the Iranian mainland spread in dense, cold layers across the surface, swallowing the horizon, wrapping around antenna masts, muffling every sound except the low hum of turbines and the distant wash of surf against the rocky Iranian coastline. Nothing moved. Nothing burned. The sea had the particular stillness that sailors in this region have learned to distrust above all other conditions. That silence should have been the first warning. Welcome to World Defense, the channel where we break down the operations that reshaped the balance of power on the global stage. What unfolded in the next 47 minutes in the waters of the Persian Gulf was not an accident, and it was not a provocation without consequences. It was a lesson written in fire and smoke directly onto the hull of an American destroyer. A lesson about what happens when a regional power miscalculates its own invisibility, and about what the United States Navy does to adversaries who confuse a quiet night with a safe one. The Iranian submarine of the Ghadir-class, hull designation S-802, operating under the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, had departed Bandar Abbas Naval Base 38 hours before the incident. Displacement: 120 tons surfaced. Hull length: 29 meters, small, nearly invisible on radar returns. Designed for literal operations in shallow, congested waters like the Persian Gulf, the Ghadir-class was Iran's answer to asymmetric naval warfare. Submerged speed: 11 knots. Acoustic signature: roughly 3 times quieter than comparable Cold War designs. Armament: 2 533mm torpedo tubes and, critically important for this story, external launch rails for the Noor anti-ship missile, Iran's domestically modified derivative of the Chinese C-802. Maximum engagement range of the Noor: 120 kilometers. Missile speed at terminal phase: 0.9 Mach, sea skimming at 7 to 15 meters above the surface. Warhead: 165 kilograms of shaped high explosive with a delayed action fuse, designed to penetrate a hull before detonating inside. Enough to open a destroyer like a tin can. The commanding officer of S-802, Commander Reza Moradi, had received his target coordinates before leaving port. He was 44 years old, a career IRGC Navy officer with 17 years of submarine service. Patient, technically capable, and convinced that his boat was invisible in this fog, at this depth, in this acoustic environment. USS Churchill, an Arleigh Burke-class Flight 2A guided missile destroyer, hull number DDG-81, upgraded in 2019 with the baseline 9C combat system, was conducting freedom of navigation operations in the northern Persian Gulf. Moradi knew Churchill's heading. Her speed of 14 knots and the predicted engagement window, a corridor 12 nautical miles wide between the Al-Farsi Bank Shoal and the international shipping lanes. Churchill would have to pass through it. That is where S-802 waited, 22 nautical miles from the target, hovering at 18 meters depth, engines barely turning over, crew at silent routine. What Moradi did not know was enough to change everything. American intelligence had been tracking S-802 for 96 hours, from the precise moment the submarine cleared the pier at Bandar Abbas. The first contact was established by a P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft from Patrol Squadron FIV P-47, operating out of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The distinctive acoustic signature of the Ghadir's diesel engine at startup was captured at a range of 340 kilometers by sonobuoys dropped in the approaches to the Strait of Hormuz. That data was transmitted in real time to 5th Fleet intelligence staff in Bahrain. Then the SOSUS network confirmed the contact, the fixed underwater hydrophone array along the floor of the Persian Gulf that has been tracking every submerged movement in this body of water for decades. SOSUS updated S-802's position every 22 minutes as she moved from deep water into the shallow northern Gulf. NRO satellite reconnaissance provided the third confirmation. An infrared pass over Bandar Abbas captured the thermal signature of the submarine's engine at startup with sufficient resolution to identify the vessel class and berth of origin. Over 96 hours, American analysts reconstructed the full route, identified Churchill as the intended target, and calculated the engagement window to within 11 minutes. USS Churchill received its warning at 02:19 hours via flash precedence message from 5th Fleet. Captain Daniel Ward read it at the chart table in the Combat Information Center. He called his department heads for a 4-minute briefing, set the crew to Modified Condition 2, and began methodical preparation. Target solutions were preloaded into the Tomahawk mission planning system. The MH-60R Seahawk crew was briefed, suited up, and sitting in the cockpit with engines in standby by 0310. Ward had nearly 90 minutes. He used every second. At 0341 hours, the operator on the AN/SQS-53C hull-mounted sonar reported, quote, "Zero Ward was already at the tactical display." He had been waiting for that report. Battle stations were called at 0343. The ship was ready in 90 seconds. At 0347 hours, S-802 ascended to periscope depth, 6 meters. Maradi confirmed Churchill's position at approximately 18 nautical miles on bearing 228 and gave the order to fire. The first Noor missile left the launch rail at 0347:18. The second followed at 0347:42. Maradi watched them go, saw them settle onto their sea-skimming profiles, and felt the satisfaction of a man who believes he's achieved surprise. Time of flight to target, roughly 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Air contact, bearing 047, altitude 15 meters, speed 0.88 Mach, tracking inbound. Second contact, bearing 047, interval 24 seconds, general quarters. The operator's voice was flat, controlled. That is what training sounds like. USS Churchill activated the AN/SLQ-32 V3 electronic warfare suite within 8 seconds of detection. The system generated radar phantoms designed to capture the Noor seekers and pull them off course. Simultaneously, 4 MiG-53 Nulka active missile decoys were launched, rocket-propelled devices that emit a radar signal mimicking a large surface combatant, maneuvering autonomously to draw incoming missiles away from the ship. The Mk-36 SRBOC chaff launchers fired at 0350:02, filling Churchill's radar environment with metallic clouds. The ship became a maze of ghost signals. The first Noor took the bait. Its seeker locked onto a Nulka at 1,400 meters from Churchill and followed it off course. Deflecting 14 degrees to port, the missile struck the water 800 meters off Churchill's port beam at 0350:39. The detonation threw a 30-meter column of water into the black fog. The shockwave hit the hull as a sharp concussive thud. No damage, no casualties. The crew absorbed it without breaking procedure. The second missile was not seduced. On its terminal approach at approximately 600 meters, the seeker rejected the decoy and reacquired the real hull. At 0350:51, the Noor struck Churchill's starboard side at frame 147, just above the water line. The 165-kilogram warhead detonated inside Engineering Space Number 2, destroying a structural bulkhead, rupturing 2 fuel service lines, knocking both starboard diesel generators offline, and igniting a Class Bravo fire in the aft technical space. 9 sailors were wounded by fragmentation and concussion. 2 suffered severe burns. The ship took a 3-degree list to starboard. The fire was real. The smoke moved through the ventilation system within seconds, but Churchill did not lose steerage, propulsion, or communications. Captain Ward did not give his crew 30 seconds to process what had happened. At 0351, 05, 14 seconds after impact, he issued 3 orders in rapid succession. Launch the Seahawk, activate counterflooding on frames 144 through 152, and open the 5th Fleet Command net. The MH-60R was airborne at 0353, climbing through the fog on bearing 047, the tactical systems operator already lowering the AN/AQS-22, dipping sonar on the first hover. Ward's transmission to 5th Fleet was a single pre-designated code word, Phoenix. Ship is hit. Counter-operation commenced. Weapons free. Acknowledgement came back in 19 seconds. The Phalanx CIWS Block 1B on the bow slewed to bearing 047 and locked into surface search mode. If S-802 surfaced to observe the damage it had caused, the system would engage before any human command was given. 4,500 rounds per minute. It does not deliberate. It fires. Damage control teams moved through smoke-filled passageways to isolate engineering space number 2. The hatch was sealed. Foam suppression activated. The fire had room to burn, but not room to spread. Ward held his course, 175 degrees, 12 knots, and watched the thermal imaging feed from the damage control station. He was not slowing down. At 0354 hours, Ward authorized the launch of 4 BGM-109E Tomahawk Block 4 land attack cruise missiles from the forward Mark 41 vertical launch system. The guidance packages had been preloaded during the 90-minute warning window using Tercom terrain matching for mid-course navigation and DSMAC digital scene matching for terminal precision. Targets: Pier N4 at Bandar Abbas Naval Base, the primary operational berth for Ghadir-class submarines, and an IRGC shore-based anti-ship missile battery on Abu Musa Island assessed to have provided the radar targeting track that enabled S-802's attack. First Tomahawk away at 035433. 3 minutes and 42 seconds after the missile hit. The fire was still burning. The list was still 3 degrees. 2 sailors were in the medical bay with burns. The Tomahawk climbed out of the VLS cell, oriented on bearing 027, dropped to cruise altitude, and accelerated to 880 kilometers per hour. Second, 035451. Third, 035509. Fourth, 035527. Range to targets 190 to 210 kilometers. Circular error probable. 10 meters. Time of flight, approximately 13 minutes. The MH-60R Seahawk worked the contact fast. The AN/AQS-22 sonar recorded a contact at bearing 052, range 2.4 nautical miles on the first dip. Tactical Systems Operator Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kwan dropped 3 additional sonobuoys in a triangulating pattern and cross-referenced the passive acoustic returns against the submarine identification library in the mission computer. Classification: Ghadir-class, high confidence. She called it at 035744. From the north, the second P-8A Poseidon, scrambled from Al Udeid on the Phoenix signal, was adding its own sonobuoy pattern, creating an overlapping acoustic net 8 nautical miles across. S-802 could not change course without being tracked at every meter of her run. Commander Muradi heard the Seahawk's active sonar pulse through his hull at 0352 hours. He ordered maximum depth, hard turn to course 195 maximum speed. The boat pushed to 11 knots. He ejected acoustic countermeasures from the stern, gas-generating canisters designed to mask his escape in a cloud of false returns. He had done this before. He believed he could do it again. At 035812, Kwan's voice came through steady. Contact confirmed, bearing 052, range 2.1 nautical miles. Depth estimated 35 meters, tracking south at 9 knots. Weapons Release Authority was confirmed at 0358:29 by the 5th Fleet Tactical Action Officer monitoring the engagement from Bahrain. The first Mark 54 Mako lightweight torpedo entered the water at 0358:44. A 276-kilogram weapon with a combined active/passive acoustic seeker and a sprint speed of 40 knots. The seeker activated on water entry and acquired S-802 on the 11th second. Muradi felt the pings through the hull. He executed the final maneuver available to him, hard turn to starboard, emergency speed, every remaining countermeasure ejected in a single volley. A cloud of bubbles and cavitation noise erupted behind the boat, briefly saturating the acoustic environment. The Mark 54 lost lock for 4 seconds. Then it found him again. Distance to target at reacquisition, 180 meters. At 180 meters and 40 knots, there is no maneuver left to make. The underwater detonation was recorded by SOSUS at 035907. Seismic stations on the UAE coast registered the event at magnitude 1.3. The acoustic signature of S-802's pressure hull collapsing registered separately, 0.4 seconds after the detonation pulse. From first missile fired by S-802 to submarine destroyed, 11 minutes and 49 seconds. The 4 Tomahawks arrived over Iranian territory at 0407 and 0408 hours. The DS-MAC terminal guidance on the first missile acquired Pier N4 at Bandar Abbas from a stored reference image, made a final course correction of 7 degrees at 1,200 meters from impact, and struck the pier's central structure at 0408:03. The second missile impacted 6 seconds later, 40 meters further along the same pier. Both detonations were captured in real time by NRO satellite sensors whose coverage window had been maintained over Bandar Abbas since Ward's Phoenix transmission. The pier collapsed into the harbor on its western side. 2 Ghadir-class submarines at adjacent moorings sustained damage from blast overpressure and debris. The IRGC missile battery on Abu Musa Island went silent at 040917. No further electromagnetic emissions from that site were detected in the 72 hours following the strike. The infrastructure that had guided S-802 to Churchill had been erased from the order of battle of the IRGC Navy within 22 minutes of the attack being launched. USS Churchill reached Manama naval support activity under her own power at 0711 hours. Fire extinguished at 0437, list corrected at 0512. She arrived at the pier with her colors flying and her combat systems fully operational. At 0940 hours, a U.S. Navy spokesman issued a brief statement. An incident had occurred in the Persian Gulf. It was under investigation. Operational security precluded further comment. 47 words. The Iranian side maintained public silence on the loss of S-802 for 72 hours. Then the state news agency, IRNA, published death notices for 31 members of the submarine service under the category Fallen in the Performance of Duty. No vessel names, no location, no cause. The IRGC Navy has not confirmed or denied the loss of any submarine since. What happened in those 47 minutes in the Persian Gulf speaks to the reality of modern naval combat more clearly than years of theoretical analysis. The first lesson is about information dominance. S-802 believed it was hunting. It had intelligence on its target's route, speed, and schedule. Its commanding officer was experienced and confident. None of that mattered because the United States Navy had been watching that submarine for 96 hours before the first missile was fired. 3 independent systems, P-8A Poseidon acoustic surveillance, the SOSUS seabed hydrophone network, and NRO satellite reconnaissance, combined to give American planners a complete picture of the threat from the moment it left its pier. The submarine never achieved surprise. It achieved only the illusion of surprise. And it is not clear that even those final seconds were outside American planning. The second lesson concerns continuous lethality. Churchill fired 4 cruise missiles 3 minutes and 42 seconds after absorbing a direct warhead hit. That timeline is only possible when a crew has preloaded targeting data, pre-briefed procedures, and a commanding officer who made every critical decision before the enemy acted. Ward did not respond to the attack. He continued a plan already running since 0219 hours, undisturbed by fire, smoke, casualties, or the list beneath his feet. The third lesson is about the geography of consequences. The missile that struck Churchill came from a submarine. That submarine received its data from a shore facility. That facility no longer exists. The IRGC's capacity to repeat the same attack in the same corridor was eliminated within 22 minutes of the strike. A Tomahawk does not only destroy the attacker, it reaches back along the entire chain of cause and effect and removes the conditions that made the attack possible in the first place. In the Persian Gulf, silence is never safety. It is the interval between the decision and the consequence. That interval belongs to the United States Navy.